The morning sunlight filtered through the small window of Amora's room, casting long shadows over her desk cluttered with books and notebooks. Amora sat in front of the mirror, her fingers hesitating as she tied her scarf over her head. The familiar knot at the side felt like armor, shielding her from the world. She looked at the reflection staring back at her. The faded blue scarf barely concealed the tumor-like mark stretching from her cheekbone to her jawline. The skin was slightly raised, discolored, and impossible to ignore. "Amora," her mother called from the kitchen. "You're going to be late for school." "Come in, Mama," she replied, grabbing her backpack. She cast one last glance at the mirror before heading out. Today was going to be just like every other day, a day of stares, whispers, and cruel laughter. As she walked to school, Amora kept her head down, her eyes fixed on the pavement. She could hear the distant chatter of students gathering in groups near the gates. Her footsteps slowed as she approached, her stomach tightening with every step. "There she is," a girl's voice rang out, loud enough for Amora to hear. "The scarf queen. What's she hiding under there?" A second head. Laughter erupted, sharp and cutting, and Amora clenched her fists. She didn't look up. She had learned long ago that reacting only made things worse. Instead, she quickened her pace, her heart pounding as she slipped through the school doors and into the relative safety of the hallway. Inside the classroom, the atmosphere was quieter. Amora took her usual seat in the back corner, where she could observe without being seen. She pulled out her notebook, flipping to the page filled with her neat, tiny handwriting. If there was one thing she excelled at, it was academics. Numbers and formulas didn't judge her. They didn't laugh or call her ugly. They just made sense. The door opened, and Mr. Peters walked in, carrying a stack of papers. He was a kind man in his 40s with a streak of gray in his hair and a perpetually encouraging smile. "Good morning, everyone," he said, placing the papers on his desk. "I have your test results." Amora's heart skipped a beat. Tests were her moment to shine, her chance to prove that she was more than the girl with the mark. As Mr. Peters began handing out the papers, a wave of murmur swept through the room. "Another C," a boy groaned. "I hate this class." "Amora," Mr. Peters said as he reached her desk. "Excellent work, as always. Full marks." A few heads turned, and Amora heard the whisper start again. "Of course, she aced it," someone muttered. "It's not like she has anything else to do." Amora's cheeks burned, but she kept her focus on the paper in front of her. Perfect score. She should have felt proud, but the weight of the stares and snide comments made the achievement hollow. Still, she told herself, this was her strength. No one could take that away from her. Lunchtime was the hardest part of the day. The cafeteria was a minefield of cliques and chaos, and Amora always felt like she was walking into enemy territory. With her tray in hand, she scanned the room for an empty table. The back corner near the vending machines was her usual spot, a quiet refuge where no one bothered her. As she made her way across the room, a loud voice cut through the noise. "Hey, Amora. Nice scarf. Did your grandma knit it for you?" The comment was met with laughter, and Amora's grip on her tray tightened. She didn't stop walking. She didn't turn around. She had learned to keep moving, to pretend she couldn't hear them. Reaching her table, she sat down and opened her book. Reading during lunch was her shield, a way to escape the world around her. Today, it was a medical textbook she had borrowed from the library, filled with diagrams of the human body. She traced the lines of a diagram showing the circulatory system, imagining herself as a doctor one day, helping people the way no one had helped her. "Is this seat taken?" The voice startled her. She looked up to see Daniel standing in front of her, holding his tray. He was tall and lean, with tousled brown hair and an easy smile. Amora blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. No," she stammered, gesturing to the seat across from her. Daniel sat down, setting his tray on the table. "I hope you don't mind," he said. "It's way too loud over there." Amora glanced at the tables behind him, where his friends were laughing and joking. "Why aren't you sitting with them?" she asked before she could stop herself. He shrugged. "I felt like a change of scenery." They ate in silence for a few moments, and Amora couldn't shake the feeling of unease. No one had ever willingly sat with her before, let alone someone like Daniel. He was one of the popular kids, not in the loud, obnoxious way of Layla and her crowd, but in a quiet, confident way that made people gravitate toward him. "You're really good at science," Daniel said suddenly, breaking the silence. Amora blinked. "What? Science?" he repeated. "I heard Mr. Peters say you got full marks on the test." "That's impressive." "Oh," she said, feeling her cheeks warm. "Thanks." Daniel leaned forward, his expression curious. "How do you do it?" "I mean, I study for hours, and I still barely scrape by." Amora hesitated. "I like it," she said finally. "It makes sense to me. It's like solving a puzzle." "That's cool," he said with a smile. "Maybe you could help me sometime. I could use all the help I can get." For the first time that day, Amora felt the corners of her mouth twitch into a small smile. "Maybe," she said softly. The next day started like any other for Amora. She walked into the school building with her scarf tied tightly around her face, her books clutched to her chest. The whispers began the moment she stepped into the hallway, but she had trained herself to ignore them. Today, however, something felt different, off. The stairs lingered longer, the whispers seemed louder. As she approached her locker, her steps faltered. A piece of paper was taped to the door, the words scrawled in thick, black marker. "Why even bother hiding it? You're still ugly." Amora froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Around her, students giggled and whispered, some pretending to look away while others openly stared. Her fingers trembled as she ripped the note from her locker and crumpled it in her hand. The humiliation burned hotter than ever, and she fought the urge to cry right there in the hallway. "Amora." She turned to see Daniel walking toward her. His expression darkened when he noticed the crumpled paper in her hand. "What's that?" "Nothing," she said quickly, shoving it into her bag. Daniel frowned. "It doesn't look like nothing. Please, just drop it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Amora. I'm used to it, okay?" she interrupted, her voice breaking. She looked away, unable to meet his eyes. "This is just how things are for me." Daniel's jaw tightened, and for a moment, he didn't say anything. Finally, he spoke, his voice firm. "That doesn't mean it's okay." Amora didn't respond. Instead, she turned back to her locker, her hands shaking as she opened it and grabbed her books. She didn't notice Daniel staring after her, his expression troubled. That evening, Daniel sat in the study of his family's sprawling home, his thoughts consumed by Amora. He couldn't shake the image of her standing in front of her locker, trying to hide her pain. He had always known her as the quiet, intelligent girl who seemed to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. But now, he was beginning to understand just how heavy that weight was. "Daniel." He looked up to see his father standing in the doorway. Robert Blake was a tall, imposing man with a kind smile that belied his stern demeanor. As the owner of one of the largest healthcare companies in the region, he was known for his philanthropy and dedication to helping others. "You've been quiet all evening," his father said, stepping into the room. "Is something on your mind?" Daniel hesitated before speaking. "Dad, do you know any specialists who deal with facial tumors?" His father raised an eyebrow. "That's a very specific question. Why do you ask?" Daniel explained everything about Amora, the mark on her face, and how she had been bullied for years. He described how brilliant she was and how much she wanted to become a doctor. "She's one of the smartest people I've ever met," Daniel said. "But she's been through so much because of something she can't control. I want to help her, Dad. I think she deserves the chance to feel normal. Robert listened intently, his expression thoughtful. When Daniel finished, his father nodded. I'll make a few calls. There's a specialist I know who's one of the best in the country. If she's willing, we'll make sure she gets the help she needs. Thank you, Dad, Daniel said, relief flooding through him. The next morning, Daniel waited for Amora outside the school gates. When she arrived, he stepped forward, blocking her path. Can we talk? He asked. Amora hesitated, glancing around nervously. What is it? I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, he began. About how things have always been this way for you. Daniel. Just hear me out, he said quickly. My dad knows a specialist. One of the best surgeons in the country. If you're willing, we can help you get the surgery to remove the tumor. Amora stared at him, her eyes wide. What? It wouldn't cost you anything, Daniel continued. My dad would cover it. He does this kind of thing all the time, helping people who can't afford medical treatment. Amora shook her head, her hands clutching the straps of her backpack. I can't let you do that. It's too much. You wouldn't be asking, Daniel said. I'm offering. Tears welled in Amora's eyes, and she looked away, her voice trembling. Why are you doing this? Because you deserve better, he said simply. Amora hesitated, her mind racing. The thought of living without the mark on her face felt like an impossible dream, one she had stopped hoping for a long time ago. But now, that dream was within reach, and she didn't know how to feel. I'll think about it, she said finally. Daniel nodded, his expression gentle. Take all the time you need. Just know that the offer stands. The decision weighed heavily on Amora for days. She talked it over with her mother, who was hesitant at first but eventually agreed. If this is what you want, Amora, her mother said, then you should go for it. You deserve to be happy. With her mother's blessing, Amora approached Daniel one afternoon after school. Okay, she said quietly. I'll do it. The process moved quickly. Within weeks, Amora was sitting in a plush waiting room with Daniel and her mother, nervously twisting her hands in her lap. The specialist, Dr. Harris, had explained the procedure in detail, answering all of her questions and assuring her that the surgery had a high success rate. When the day of the surgery arrived, Amora was a bundle of nerves. As she was wheeled into the operating room, she couldn't stop thinking about how her life might change. What if something went wrong? What if it didn't work? When she woke up hours later, the first thing she saw was her mother's tearful smile. It's gone, Amora, she said, her voice shaking. The mark is gone. Amora reached up, her fingers brushing her cheek. The swelling made it hard to tell, but the tumor was no longer there. For the first time in her life, she felt hope blossom in her chest. The recovery process was longer than Amora had anticipated, but every ache and discomfort was worth it. She spent 2 weeks at home, where her mother hovered over her like a guardian angel, ensuring she followed every instruction from Dr. Harris to the letter. The first time Amora looked in the mirror after the swelling had subsided, her breath caught in her throat. Her cheek, once marked by the tumor, was now smooth and even. There was a faint scar, but it was hardly noticeable. She ran her fingers over her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. Is it really me? She whispered. Her mother, standing behind her, placed a hand on her shoulder. Yes, my love. It's always been you, beautiful and strong. Amora turned and hugged her mother tightly. Thank you, Mama, for everything. Her mother smiled through her tears. Thank Daniel and his family. They gave you this chance. Amora nodded. She had been avoiding the thought of seeing Daniel again, unsure of how to thank him for something so life-changing. But deep down, she knew she couldn't put it off forever. The morning of her return to school, Amora felt a mix of excitement and dread. She chose her outfit carefully, A soft blue blouse that brought out the warmth in her complexion, paired with dark jeans and her favorite sneakers. For the first time in years, she didn't wear a scarf. When she arrived at the school gates, the usual chatter died down as students turned to look at her. Whispers rippled through the crowd, but for once, they weren't mocking. Is that Amara? She looks so different. She's gorgeous. Amora's heart raced as she walked down the hallway, her head held high. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, and it made her uncomfortable. But she reminded herself that she had earned this moment. Amora. She turned to see Daniel jogging toward her, his face lighting up with a smile. Hey, he said, stopping in front of her. You look incredible. Amora felt her cheeks warm. Thank you. And thank you for everything. I don't even know how to repay you. You don't have to, Daniel said. Seeing you happy is enough. For the first time, Amora smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that made Daniel's heart skip a beat. Over the next few days, Amora's life changed in ways she hadn't anticipated. The same students who had once bullied her were now going out of their way to talk to her. Hey, Amora, do you want to join us for lunch? A girl named Mia asked one afternoon. Amora hesitated, glancing toward the table where Daniel was already seated. No, thanks, she said politely. I already have plans. As she walked past Mia's table, she caught snippets of conversation. She thinks she's better than us now. Typical. She gets a new face and suddenly she's too good for everyone. Amora felt a pang of frustration but brushed it off. She wasn't going to let their bitterness affect her. She joined Daniel at their usual spot in the corner of the cafeteria, where he greeted her with a knowing smile. They're jealous, he said, taking a bite of his sandwich. Of what? Amora asked, genuinely confused. Of your confidence, Daniel replied. And the fact that you didn't let them break you. Amora looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. You're the only reason I'm here, Daniel. I'll never forget that. Not everyone was willing to accept Amora's transformation. Leila, the self-proclaimed queen of the school, had been watching from the sidelines with growing resentment. One afternoon, Leila approached Amora in the hallway, her arms crossed. So, what's your secret? She asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Did you pay someone to make you look like that? Amora met her gaze calmly. Actually, I had surgery to remove a tumor. It wasn't about looks, it was about my health. Leila smirked. Sure, whatever you say. Just don't forget where you came from. Amora's eyes narrowed. I'll never forget where I came from. And I won't forget how people like you treated me, either. The crowd that had gathered around them murmured in agreement. Leila's face turned red, and she stormed off, muttering under her breath. Daniel appeared at Amora's side, a proud smile on his face. That was amazing, he said. Amora shrugged, but she couldn't help smiling. It needed to be said. When Mr. Peters announced the school debate competition, Amora hesitated to sign up. Public speaking wasn't her strength, and the thought of standing on stage in front of a crowd made her stomach churn. You should do it, Daniel encouraged her. The topic is perfect for you. The topic was judging people by their appearance, and as much as it scared her, Amora knew she had a unique perspective to share. On the day of the competition, the auditorium was packed. Amora stood backstage, clutching her note cards, her heart pounding. You've got this, Daniel said, giving her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. When it was her turn, Amora stepped onto the stage, the bright lights blinding her momentarily. She took a deep breath and began. For years, I was judged not for who I am, but for something I couldn't control, she said. Her voice trembled at first, but it grew stronger as she continued. I was called names, excluded, and made to feel like I didn't matter. But what I've learned is that our worth isn't defined by how we look. It's defined by our actions, our kindness, and our resilience. Her words hung in the air, and when she finished, The audience erupted into applause. Amora scanned the crowd and saw Daniel standing, clapping with pride. As graduation approached, Amora reflected on how far she had come. She was chosen as valedictorian, and on the big day, she stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. Today is about more than just celebrating our achievements, she began. It's about acknowledging the people who helped us along the way. For me, that person is Daniel Blake. The crowd turned to look at Daniel, who blushed and smiled. Daniel believed in me when no one else did, Amora continued. He taught me that kindness can change lives. And because of him, I'm standing here today, ready to chase my dreams. When she finished, the audience gave her a standing ovation. The summer after graduation was a whirlwind of preparation and reflection for Amora. She had been awarded a full scholarship to a prestigious university, where she planned to study medicine. Her dream of becoming a doctor was finally within reach, and every step forward felt surreal. Daniel and Amora spent most of the summer together. They often met at the park near her house, sitting on a bench under the shade of a large oak tree. Amora brought her notebooks, always eager to get a head start on her studies, while Daniel shared his plans to study biomedical research. Are you sure about medicine? Daniel asked one afternoon, his tone teasing but warm. Amora smiled, flipping through her notes. Absolutely. I want to help kids who've gone through what I did. I want to give them hope. You'll be amazing, Daniel said sincerely. You've always been good at helping people. Amora glanced at him, her expression softening. You helped me first. Their conversation drifted to lighter topics, but the bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. Starting university was both exciting and intimidating for Amora. The campus was sprawling and vibrant, filled with students from all walks of life. For the first time, Amora felt like she could blend in, free from the shadow of her past. She threw herself into her studies, excelling in her classes and forming friendships with fellow students who shared her passion for medicine. But she never forgot where she came from or the people who had supported her. Daniel, attending a university in another city, stayed in touch through late-night calls and frequent visits during breaks. Their friendship remained a constant source of strength for Amora, grounding her amidst the challenges of her new life. In her second year of university, Amora joined a volunteer program that provided free medical checkups for underprivileged children. The first time she walked into the clinic, she felt a pang of recognition. Many of the children had visible scars, deformities, or conditions that made them targets for ridicule, just as she had been. One little girl, Ella, caught her attention. She had a cleft lip and avoided eye contact, her small hands clutching the hem of her dress. Hi, Ella, Amora said gently, kneeling to the girl's level. I'm Amora. I'm here to help. Ella glanced up, her eyes wary. Will it hurt? She whispered. Amora smiled, her voice soft and reassuring. Not at all. I promise. As Amora guided Ella through the checkup, she thought about her own journey and the people who had shown her kindness when she needed it most. She vowed to be that person for others. Years passed, and Amora graduated with top honors from medical school. On the day of her graduation ceremony, she was surprised to see Daniel waiting outside the auditorium with a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite. Congratulations, Dr. Amora, he said, grinning. Amora laughed, her heart swelling with joy. You didn't have to come all this way. Are you kidding? I wouldn't miss this for the world, Daniel said. They spent the evening reminiscing about their journey, from their first awkward conversation in the cafeteria to the moment Daniel had changed her life forever. I have something for you, Daniel said, pulling out an envelope. Amora opened it and found a brochure for a new foundation. The title read, The Amora Initiative, Transforming Lives, One Smile at a Time. What is this? She asked, her voice trembling. It's a foundation I started, Daniel explained. We'll fund surgeries for kids who can't afford them. I've already spoken to some surgeons, including Dr. Harris. They are on board. Amora stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Daniel, this is... I don't even know what to say. Say you'll be a part of it, Daniel said. Amora smiled through her tears. Of course I will. The foundation's first beneficiary was Ella, the little girl Amora had met during her volunteer work. Amora stood by Ella's side as she prepared for surgery, holding her hand and whispering words of encouragement. When the surgery was over, Ella looked in the mirror, her eyes wide with wonder. I'm pretty now, she said softly. You've always been pretty, Amora said, kneeling beside her. Now the world can see it too. Ella threw her arms around Amora, and in that moment, Amora felt the weight of her journey lift. She had turned her pain into purpose, and it was the most rewarding feeling in the world. Years later, Amora and Daniel stood together at a gala celebrating the success of the foundation. Hundreds of children had been helped, their lives transformed by the surgeries funded by the initiative. As Amora addressed the audience, her voice steady and filled with emotion, she reflected on her journey. Kindness saved my life, she said. It gave me hope when I had none and showed me that we are defined not by how we look, but by how we treat others. This foundation is proof that even the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples that change lives. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Amora looked at Daniel, who gave her a thumbs up from the audience. They had come full circle, and their shared mission was only beginning. Amora's story became a beacon of hope for others, inspiring countless people to look beyond appearances and embrace the beauty within. She and Daniel continued to work side by side, their bond stronger than ever. Through the Amora initiative, they created a legacy of kindness, proving that compassion could change the world, one smile at a time. If you were inspired by Amora's story of resilience and kindness, there's so much more to come. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an inspiring story. Join our community, and let's spread hope, kindness, and transformation together.